So fresh off the heels of Resident Evil 4, there's a lot of speculation about where Resident Evil is going to go next. Today I wanted to have a short discussion and kind of explore those options and just have a little bit of fun. Obviously no one knows exactly where Capcom is going to go, but I think I've got a good idea. So sit back and enjoy the show. Before we jump into what's next for Resident Evil, I just wanted to take a quick moment and talk about how incredible Resident Evil 4 Remake was in separate ways. Can we just take a moment to appreciate how incredible this game is? And it truly might be my game of the year. I just wanted to quickly say that before we get started. Now, in terms of where Resident Evil is going to go next after Separate Ways, I think there's a handful of options we could explore, but I think the most obvious one is going to be remaking Resident Evil 5. Resident Evil 5 was one of the best sellers within the franchise, following off the heels of Resident Evil 4. It only makes sense for Capcom to kind of follow that up and take advantage of that, honestly. It was one of the best-selling games of all time, so I think it makes sense for them to go into that direction. Everything that happened in Resident Evil 4 Remake also sets it up nicely. People are familiar with some of these characters now. Wesker and his plans at the end of Separate Ways, I think, are in line with Resident Evil 5, obviously. I think it's a cash cow for Capcom, and that is the most obvious and most realistic direction I think it's going to go next. But Capcom did have a survey they sent out to fans, which I filled out, and people voted on what they would like to play next. Well, not play, but remake next. And Resident Evil Code Veronica was on that list, and that's what got my vote. I would love to see Capcom remake Code Veronica. I think it has so much potential. The only problem is it kind of has a cult following and it didn't sell all that great. So compared to Resident Evil 5, I think in terms of a financial decision for the company, Resident Evil 5 is going to be a lot more lucrative. But in terms of fan service and what the fans want, I think it's Code Veronica. And also, just talking about the two games, honestly, in terms of both of these games, this one needs a remake much more than Resident Evil 5. It's also a very long game and has some very controversial things about it, and well, maybe not so much anymore. But there's just a lot of wacky and just weird stuff within the story itself, so I would like to see where they take Albert and just some of these other weird characters. You know, Steve. Steve is just hilarious in his own right, and I think he has potential as a character, because he has an interesting story, to say the least, but they definitely need a new voice actor this time, and I don't know. Just some different dialogue from him. But you gotta love Steve, and obviously Claire is one of my favorite characters, so I would love to see her once again in the RE engine. And you also get to play as Chris in that campaign, so I don't know in terms of a remake if they would keep it like the original and bounce back and forth between Claire and Chris with the different campaigns throughout the story, or would they allow the option to just select which character you would like to play as in the beginning of the game? Because I think that would be an interesting way to go about it too. There's some incredible boss fights in Code Veronica that I would love to see in the RE engine, between the Tyrant on the plane, and then what's his name, Nofarasus, the guy that's tied up in the little basement cell on Antarctica. I think he is one of the hardest boss fights in the game when you fight him on the roof, and well, outside of the plane with the Tyrant. Everyone's going to talk about that too. But I would love to see those recreated and reimagined in a remake. That would be so much fun. I have so much nostalgia for this particular game. I originally played it on the Dreamcast back in the day because I was impatient with the PlayStation 1, and I wanted the Dreamcast because I grew up with the Sega Genesis. And I kind of was bummed out because I didn't get to play you know, Resident Evil 1, 2, and 3. Well, I played them at friend's house, but I didn't get to own them until later in life because I actually didn't own a PlayStation 1 for an extended period of time until like late into middle school. And I know I'm kind of dating myself right there, but I had the Dreamcast. Anyways, that's what I was trying to get to, and Code Veronica was one of the only ones I could play on the Dreamcast, so of course it quickly became one of my favorites. So I would love for them to do Code Veronica next, but I have a feeling it's going to be Resident Evil 5. But there are a few more options, 2 in particular, and we will discuss those next. Now, another direction Resident Evil could take it next is remaking Resident Evil 1, which they've already remade, and it's a great remaster. It's a great remake. It originally came out on the GameCube. It still holds up and looks great today, I'll be honest with you. But the tank controls, kind of that old school system, I think, doesn't appeal to some of the modern Resident Evil players. So updating it and putting it in line with the rest of the games in the series with the RE engine, I think would just kind of complete that series as a whole. It would give a lot of these newer fans an introduction to the series and basically showcase the mansion, introduce them to Jill and Chris, which would make sense because those are 2 key characters in RE5, so you need to kind of introduce them. Well, Chris has already been in multiple games recently, but and then people know Jill from, I guess, the RE3 remake, but it would be cool to get them caught up with the first game and see how it all got started. So I don't necessarily think they'll go that direction next just because they've already remade it before. I don't know if that's what they have in mind for the next game, but it is a route they could go. I would not be mad at it. I just don't see them actually going that direction. Now, another direction they could go, and this is the final option, coming off the heels of Death Island and talking about Jill, I think, you know, they could follow up, obviously, Resident Evil Village and go into Resident Evil 9. Now, just looking at the timeline, I wrote down here, basically starting from RE7 that was released in 2017 and then into RE2 Remake in 2019 and then Resident Evil 3 Remake in 2020. Just going off this kind of timeline, it makes sense that they're going to do another remake next instead of a mainline title, because they're using these remakes as basically an opportunity, I don't want to say to kill time, but or filler or anything like that, but it gives them time to work on those mainline entries that are usually spread out 3 to 5 years apart typically, and it gives them that extra time to kind of put into that mainline numbered entry that's going to fall in suit next. And in the meantime, they keep us busy with the remakes, which I'm not saying that like a remake is a quick way to go about it or an easy thing to do, but you have that main game to go off of. You have that source material to use, so you're not creating a game from scratch, basically. I mean, you kind of are, but you're recreating another story that's already been made, and you already have the blueprint for it. So I could see it kind of going like this. Resident Evil 5 Remake, kind of late 2024, early 2025, and then we would get RE9 in late 2025, early 2026. That's the way I see it playing out, honestly. And in terms of Resident Evil 9, I would love to see them bring back Jill Valentine and even have maybe 2 different campaigns, old school, where you just pick 2 different characters, and maybe Jill and Leon, Claire and Jill. I would love to see one of those options. I think we've seen enough from Chris. You got to bring Jill back. Let her have one last hoorah. and send her off into the sunset. And apparently there's rumors that one of the main protagonists is going to get killed off. And I've heard rumors also, you know, this is just pure speculation, but people are saying it could be Claire. I don't know. We'll see what happens. But whatever happens next, I'm really enjoying this time with Resident Evil. I think it's at an all-time high right now. They kind of lost me after RE6, I'm not going to lie, but RE7 brought me back into the franchise. I'm actually about to do a video on that, so I'm not going to get too far into it. But ever since then, they have been on a hot streak with the remakes, and it only makes sense to continue that and march into RE5. And that, in my opinion, that's what's next. But you guys let me know in the comments down below, what do you think's next for Resident Evil? Where do you see them taking the franchise next? Wherever they go, I'm sure it's going to be great, and I cannot wait. So make sure you give this video a like, consider subscribing to the channel, and I will catch you guys next time. Stay blessed.